And hello, Luis. Hello, Ken. I hope you can hear me. It is nice to see and potentially hear you guys. I hope everyone is well, safe and healthy in all of your remote locations. I'm excited to kick off this session. I'll start with an introduction and then I'll let you guys go. So I'm Matt Wurst. I am the Managing Director of Revelation, coming to you live here from the Long Island home office of Revelation. If you're not familiar with what we do, we are a content creation and marketing partner for brands, an agency, a consultancy, a supporting team, if you will, for brands' in-house agencies, from big companies to emerging startups. And we help brands connect with consumers using an omni-channel approach to purposeful content, which is why I'm excited to talk to you guys. Ken is in marketing at Henkel and Luis at LVMH on the Moet Hennessy side. So Luis, since I can see you, I will let you introduce yourself first, and then we'll jump in.
Of course. Thank you so much, Matt. My name is Luis Freitas. I run Omnichannel and CRM at Moet Hennessy, which is the spirits and wine and spirits arm of LVMH. I've been in the company for a year, but I've been doing this for, let's say, 14 years. First started with digital, then digital became omnichannel. Then people started asking, what exactly is omnichannel? And so in the last couple of months and years, I've been trying to nurture the discipline of omnichannel in the different brands that I've worked for.
Great.
Ken?
This is Ken. Yeah. Hi, folks. This is Ken Krasnow. I'm sorry I can't see you all. We have some technical difficulties. It's not that I'm shy or unshaven. But I'm happy to be here with you today. I am Vice President of Omnichannel Marketing at Henkel. Henkel, not the knife company, but the consumer global packaged goods company with brands like Dial, Right Guard, Snuggle, All, Right Guard, Soft Scrub, Combat, and many other brands across laundry, home care, and beauty. And I have all 7 consumer communication channels, which include things like media, digital marketing. I even have packaging design and a consumer call center, and all the items or departments in between. And we are definitely on an omni-channel mission, right, to connect great experiences, connect with consumers through great experiences that are seamless yet nuanced from media to shelf.
All right, great intros. And I will say that especially in this quarantine, but even before, I've been a loyal brand advocate and consumer of products from both of your companies. So thank you for getting me through laundry care and just relaxation at different times. So I found this to be really interesting in talking with you guys because you both have the word omni-channel in your titles, and that's how we consider ourselves as a partner for brands as well. Being omni doesn't necessarily mean you force one channel on consumers, but you're planning for where and how you can meet with your consumers where they are. You've both talked a little bit about how your roles cover multiple platforms and different types of marketing channels, but what does omni-channel mean in each of your organizations? And I'll start with you, Luis.
So it's a fascinating topic, and I mean we have several questions to go through, but to be honest, we could have stayed the entire meeting just on this topic, because I think the omni-channel word was seen by some people as visionary a couple of years ago. It's seen by some people nowadays as something that is just table stakes for how their brands need to perform. As you might imagine, being an alcohol importer in the United States and being under the 3-tier system, which for those of you who have not had the pleasure of working with the 3-tier system, basically when you're an alcohol importer or you're a distributor or you're a retailer, usually you cannot be 2 of those. So what happens is when you talk about omni-channel, the majority of organizations is going to say that omni-channel is about guaranteeing a seamless transactional behavior with the consumer in a seamless way across all channels in the way that makes the most sense. Now, if we're not managing transactions on our side, we had to look at omni-channel and understand what this meant for us. And so if I can partake, if I can give some knowledge or some experience that I've had with this to other organizations, is there is an omni-channel reality to every brand and every organization. You just have to find what it means to you. And for Moet Hennessy, and here I'm not speaking on behalf of Moet Hennessy, I will speak on behalf of what I believe is our omni-channel view. The omni-channel means omni-channel experiences. We are known for crafting experiences. We are luxury wines and spirits. And so when we talk about being omni, it's the ability to deliver the same level of experience that you have when you go to a Veuve Clicquot Polo in New York, across the different channels in the way that the consumer expects it. So it's not about, to Matt's point, force feeding a behavior on a channel just in way that is called consistent with the brand. Omnichannel for us is not about, it's about brand consistency, but it's about channel adequacy. So that's my 2-second answer to something that could take an hour to explain.
Ken, any additional thoughts as far as how it comes to life across your different product categories or channels?
Yeah, and it's challenging for us because we're not direct to consumer. You know, we are a CPG company. Our customers are retailers like Walmart and Kroger and Targets of the world. Yet we do create demand for our products by reaching out to consumers directly, but we don't sell to them directly. So omnichannel isn't about necessarily connecting our consumer outreach to our ability to drive sales on our own platforms. However, we do want to connect that consumer outreach to our retailers. Obviously their e-commerce efforts and brick and mortar efforts. So what we focus a lot on is telling the right piece of our narrative to consumers at the right time. And so what omnichannel means to us is being really clear with regards to what is the role for every single tactic, right down to the core KPIs, what is the communication priority, and what we try to do is harmoniously orchestrate all of these tactics into an engagement ecosystem, so that no matter where consumers jump into our story, it feels like they're getting the information they need based on signals of intent that we're reading and the mindset that they come to the channel with. And we're providing them everything they need, but also a call to action to drive them to the next stop down the purchase funnel. So for us, it's very much about coordinating the myriad of communication tactics into one harmonious ecosystem that actually becomes more value-added and personal the more consumers interact with our brands.
And I can imagine, having worked with both of your organizations, but also with other large enterprise companies, that there are different objectives and teams across different platforms, and ensuring consistency can be both a creative challenge and an operational challenge. But as you think about these past 6 to 8 weeks, or however long it's been, it feels like 6 to 8 months, I know, but we've seen significant change in terms of consumer expectation and behavior, as well as brand marketing strategy and activation. Brian just talked us through a lot of data and how we're all evolving to be more empathetic and more consumer focused. I know you're in different verticals, obviously, but are there things within your respective organizations or categories that you see having changed permanently when it comes to just omni-channel consideration? And Ken, we can start with you this time. Or maybe Luis, we could start with you.
Sorry, no, I got it. Sorry, I put myself on mute. So I was giving a great presentation to my family here. So in terms of things that have not that have changed and that will be here with us, for the foreseeable future, I guess I would say the importance of data. That's something that's changed over the course of the last maybe few years, and is only growing in importance. So we definitely see modern marketing, as it always has been, a blend of art and science, except I think the art and the science are both different. I think the art today is less about focusing on your TVC and more about focusing on content strategies that bring the brand promise to life in really useful and value-added ways. I think the science piece is less about reliance on second-party, less reliance on syndicated data, and what people say from a qual and a quant perspective, although those data sources are very important. But I think it's really incorporating what people are actually doing more and what they're saying, not in a focus group, but what they're saying to each other in terms of social sentiment. So having the right technology stack, having the right mission where everybody's on a data hunt throughout their specific function, and all that data finds its way into a consumer data platform where it can be organized, understood, and modeled for better actions and outcomes. I think that's with us to stay.
And right now, are you leveraging real-time insights to adapt to the here and now versus thinking more broadly, longer term, and bigger picture?
Yes, so we are doing that. We are listening to what consumers are saying, and then we're trying to act and then listen again. So we have the tools that enable us to do that. We are also working with in-flight optimization as well, so that it may not necessarily be real time, but it's near time changes across creative messages, publishers, audiences, that type of thing.
And Luis, are there things that you've seen that as you're adapting, things that may have either accelerated in terms of what you were thinking about longer term that may be already here that will last?
I think so. I think Ken is absolutely right on the data point. I think all of us are probably data obsessed at this point, and I think that's an organization mandate across almost every organization that I know. I think what's starting to happen is there's a stronger triage around data that I think we didn't do as much in the past, which is understanding how different data sets come together to tell a story, be it like Ken was saying, near time, because I love the expression near time versus real time, especially because when you're performing in an alcohol category, you need to be very careful with real time, and you need to be very careful with the audience you're addressing, because there's a lot of legalities around it, and we want to make sure that we are not compliant for the sake of being compliant, but compliant for the sake of being a responsible set of brands. But I think some of the things that have changed dramatically on our side is, of course, the obsession around data and how we learn more about our consumers and how we learn what makes them tick and what is relevant for them. But it's also the understanding on one side that our different products will play a different role in consumers' lives, and that becomes very obvious, especially in an environment like COVID. As you might imagine, alcohol sales have accelerated in the e-retail space and the e-commerce space during COVID for us. But for example, you don't see that necessarily happening in champagne versus cognac, right? Because champagne in the US is associated with celebration, with a specific mindset that is not necessarily what people are feeling right now.
We'll get back there. We'll get back there, and we'll all have reasons to celebrate, and Veuve Clicquot and Maréchal be there for you. But until that happens, do you love the shameless brand plug? The truth is that we had to think about a couple of different things. One, the data that we need. Two, what occasions do we want to play with and how we want to be relevant to our consumers according to how they expect the category to behave. But then there's a last element, which is this idea of mastering and understanding and trying to own the entire consumer journey. Because I think, again, historically, there's been this idea that, okay, we drop consumers off to go to purchase, and from that point forward, we don't manage that part of the relationship. We have taken that much more seriously, and in trying to, as much as possible, drive the consumer journey in the most qualitative way possible. So are historically very focused on, let's say, higher funnel metrics for our brands, because the lower funnel metrics lied with the retailer. We are now looking at how we can contribute to the lower funnel metrics, because that guarantees that the consumer had, again, the best omni-channel experience with our brands possible, all the way to the shopping cart. Well, yeah, and it's e-commerce is certainly not a new phenomenon, but online sales, we know in the U.S. since March 1st are up significantly, right? Clearly different categories and brands are impacted differently. I think, Luis, U.S. online alcohol sales, last I saw, were up like 250% since the quarantine, or some crazy number like that. So you're welcome. But have your companies increased operational, creative, or media support specifically for e-commerce in these past few months, or had that already started before the pandemic began?
It had. I can jump in there. It had started before. We have I would say, very competent e-retail team that has been looking at the space and understanding how to develop it and how to accelerate it. Of course, that the last couple of months have given it the gas that we needed to be able to fully accelerate our ambition. So a lot, let's put it this way, a lot of what we wanted to do and what we had planned was more longer term versus what happened with COVID, which accelerated some of these long-term plans to be much more immediate because the opportunity was there and the consumer was there. But I think at the same time, again, we shouldn't be looking, and I don't think anybody at Moet Hennessy is looking at COVID as opportunity. I think that is absolutely the wrong way to look at it. We see e-commerce and we see how we try to deliver against the consumer need, because the consumers are organically going there and they're trying to find products and they want to buy, and we want to guarantee that they are able to do it. But we are trying to be also very careful of the time and very careful with the current situation, right? Because this is a precarious situation, it's a crisis situation. And so what we're trying to do with e-commerce is guaranteeing that the consumer can find us when they need us, how they need us, versus trying to push the product in a time where I think there's other priorities.
Ken, have you guys shifted or adapted e-commerce specifically?
Well, yeah. So e-commerce has been a priority for us for, a number of years, and we're growing, exponentially in e-commerce over time, both from a resource perspective and the contribution of sales and profits. For us, it's really about understanding the retailer's e-commerce offerings and platforms and being able to leverage those as effectively as possible. Each one is different. They're nuanced. We have experts, both from a FTE perspective and an agency standpoint, that really understand these platforms and are constantly working within them to get the very most out of them. So that is just, accelerating for us.
So if we shift a little bit from left brain to right brain, I like to straddle that line a little bit and think more whole brain, but from a creative or a content perspective, the consumer passions, the consumer behaviors that we all talk about and understand, whether that's the beauty, fashion, home lifestyle component, or the entertainment, nightlife, and alcohol, spirits life, they've become cultural connection points, right? And content has been what has connected us, especially digitally. For brands, that content and culture drive commerce every day, but there's now more content than ever, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So how do you know if you're striking this right balance between quantity and quality, content and marketing in that balance?
Ken, do you take first, or do you want me?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind jumping in. I think, we start with kind of where the consumer is right now. So the consumer today is raising their hand and basically saying, I've had enough interruptions, and I'm going to block you, either through technology or banner blindness, or I'm going to subscribe to services where I don't have to see your TV commercials. So you've got that going for us. And then you've got the whole trust factor. So trust in brands is just diminishing and has been diminishing over time. So I think we're all at an inflection point where what got us here today isn't going to get us to where we need to be. Now, does that mean TV commercials aren't important? No, they are important. But for us, it really is about making the consumer the center of our universe and ensuring that we're not annoying them. And there's this great quote, be the thing that consumers are interested in versus the thing that interrupts the thing that consumers are interested in. And that's what we're really striving for. And that means, I think, identifying a content niche for your brands and being the best publisher of the content within that niche, not just in your category, but period, because consumers can go anywhere, get any piece of content that you could dream of. So you need to be narrow, you need to be highly focused on your target audience. What problems are you trying to solve? and you need to put a team in place that's going to be really dedicated to being the very best publisher of this content. Now, that content should bring the brand promise to life in ways that are useful, educational, provide some utility, and that's what we're really focused on trying to do.
Amazing. I would say, so on what Ken just said, for me, it's a copy paste. What I would add to it is, I think what we tried to do at Moet Hennessy a little bit was, like you said, there's been a plethora of content coming out. And I think that brands understood that, okay, the consumer's at home, they have more free time, give them, it's an opportunity to engage and service them. I think what we try to understand is, to Ken's point, what is the role that we have to play and what is it that we can deliver to our consumers during this period that is of added value? There's a lot of content out there. At the same time, I don't know about you guys, but raise your virtual hands if you're tired of emails that say, here's what we're doing for COVID. Here's a live stream for COVID. Here's an education thing for COVID. It's gotten to a point where consumers are saying, okay, guys, we get it. There's stuff that we can do with you during this period. So what we tried to do is brand by brand and understanding the status of that brand. Because in our case, like Ken's case, we have what we call lighthouse brands. So lighthouse brands are those brands that literally you look for them to know where the category is, right? You look for Veuve Clicquot to find the champagne section. You look for Hennessy to find the cognac section. Those are lighthouse brands. From these brands, consumers have a very different level of expectation of the content that we were doing before and the content that we're doing now. And if I can give a very tangible example, Veuve Clicquot was emailing very much about their events because that's one of the things that makes Veuve Clicquot fascinating. It's polo and it's the different events that the brand does. As you might imagine, we're not talking about events now. What we're doing, we're actually giving ways for the consumer to enjoy the brand at home without necessarily pushing any type of commercial message at this point because we don't think it's the right time or place. But we're giving simple recipes that can elevate your day-to-day at home that the brand suggests. Now, all of you on the phone are probably saying, again, Luis, there's nothing original about that. We've seen other. What is original about this is that we have such an engaged community that understands the taste profile of our product and the pairings of our product that we actually saw people go from the newsletter that we sent to social. So the next day after we sent the email, we went on social and we saw people actually cooking our cacio and pepe recipe because Veuve Clicquot suggested it without even suggesting it. I mean, pair it with the product, but just a simple recipe that they can follow. And because of the ethos of Veuve Clicquot and how it's perceived as a lifestyle brand by many consumers, they had an appetite for the recipe and they tried it and they shared it with us. So across the different brands, that's the way that we're trying to pivot content. It's not more content, it's more relevant content.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I just want to say one quick thing because I could not agree with Luis more on that point. I would just say for folks who are facing a difficult situation in terms of bringing the organization along with them from a content perspective, and this is a tough thing. It's tough to get people to change. We're seeing just tremendous growth from a return on ad spend perspective. When people engage with our content, the data, the exposure files that we collect, whether they're device IDs or cookies or registration data, is really gold. Because when we take that data into our consumer data platform, model it, and push it out into the media ecosystem, whether that's through programmatic or through walled gardens, we are seeing a really big lift in sales and profits. So this is extremely important. The better content you have, the more people will come and share, register, and give you very, very valuable information that you can really turn into revenue opportunities.
So in a couple of minutes, we're going to start soliciting some audience questions, and I know that I can see here in the queue that there are many really impressive brands here who I'm sure have lots of questions for you and your impressive brands. But one thing that I've been curious about, and I've seen it in some cases we've been partnering and leading on, but even in these last few weeks, the evolution and the rapid acceleration of use on digital platforms that may not have been priorities for brands from a marketing perspective, whether it's TikTok or even a return to Facebook in some ways. I mean, my kids and their friends have pushed my wife and I onto TikTok, and I won't challenge you to follow me and see our dance videos. But channels or consumer behaviors on platforms have you noticed or been surprised by, or are you willing to push and move some of those dollars into more of those innovative buckets and push new things?
Louis, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So I think, so again, because we are alcohol, there's specific platforms that are complicated for us to be in. Period, because TikTok overall's average age tends to be relatively young still. It was the same. It was the same principle as Snapchat. It was the same principle as a couple of other brands that the technology had to get to a point where they could guarantee that we could reach the right consumer with the right age and the right profile. I would say yes. There's been a pivot in terms of how we engage with the consumer channel wise. There's a couple of channels that we might have upped the spend and the focus on versus others, because we know that people are home and people are engaging in social, engaging with email, etc. I would say that the pivot has been a very sensitive one, because we also don't want to jump into a behavior that is not yet stabilized to a certain extent. That's not the behavior that usually we do at MH. Now, this is not to say that we don't take risks and that we don't experiment and that we don't do innovation. We do. But during this period, I think what we've done is much more about what can we pivot in how our brand ethos is manifested during a normal period. How do we pivot to what is the crisis mode of this brand, and how do we deliver value to our consumers that shows on one side empathy, because I think that right now that's what people want the most is empathy, and on the other side, what role can the brands play in terms of delivering some sense of normalcy to the consumer so that this period is tolerated. So it's been less of a pivot in terms of channels. It's more of a pivot of what type of content we're putting on those channels so that it resonates with consumers right now, so that in a couple of months, once all of this is over, consumers remind us it's relevant and not as being just pushy.
And for us, we have a 70-20-10 innovation approach, a marketing innovation approach or digital innovation approach, where we're saying, like 70% of what we do is going to be tried and true tactics, right, that we know deliver. 20% are going to be, proven platforms that we just haven't been active on. So, for example, let's say Pinterest. We haven't had a big history being on Pinterest, but 20% of our budget is going to go towards big platforms that we should be experimenting with. And you know what? It was tremendous. We had some of our highest engagement rates. Our video completion rate on Pinterest for one of our beauty brands was 9 times higher than in other social media experiences that we've had. And then 10% is going to be on things that, they're kind of emerging or bleeding edge, and we want to make sure that 10% of our budget and our time goes against that. And TikTok was probably our biggest surprise there. We got well over 1 billion views for our Got to Be hairstyling brand. We spent several $100,000, but when you look at the return on ad spend, I mean, when you look at the CPM, it was something like several cents, like 5 cents.
Yeah, that's great.
It was an incredibly efficient spend and a really great experience for the brand.
Okay, great stuff. I'm going to turn to some of our audience members who have started to submit some questions. So the first is really maybe a definition question, but do you see a difference between omni-channel and cross-channel in terms of how you think about marketing?
Yes. Oh, let me please step up to the plate on that one. Thank you for asking that question. It's a great question, and it's one that many people in our organization kind of get a little bit confused on. So, cross-channel or multi-channel, in my view, is multiple channels that are activated at the same time, but they're running in parallel paths, right? So never whatever that statement is, the twain will meet, right? They just don't, they're not coordinated. Where omni-channel is really about orchestrating all of these different channels to ensure, as I was saying before, that there's a clear role for the channel to play, and it's connected to the other channels. So what we like to do is ask ourselves the question, what's next? So if I'm running a TV ad, and I'm thinking very carefully about what my goals are, am I asking the question, the omni-channel question, what's next? If I'm in a multi-channel world or a cross-channel world, I may not ask that question. But an omni-channel world, I ask what's next, meaning where do I want consumers to go from there? So if I think about that, I say, I want consumers, once they're aware of my brand, to consider it. So I want them to go to my website. Well, if that's the case, I better have a call to action within my TVC, and I better make sure my website is, mobile optimized and ready to receive consumers. And so, that's the way I would define these two things.
Okay.
I wish I had something really insightful to add, but I think Ken kind of knocked it out of the park with that one. I have a very similar opinion. I think cross-channel I always say cross-channel is 360, while omni-channel is 365. It's usually cross-channel is message at the center, broadcast to all the channels around it, and you just guarantee consistency, but you don't guarantee integration. Omni is integration, and it is about the flow 365 days.
And it's so difficult, and we're working on one last point on this. I'm so passionate about this issue, and then I'll be quiet. And Louis, you will take the next one first. We are working with IT, and I think that's one of the neat things about marketing today is that we've gotten so much closer to IT. And we're working on developing a dashboard that helps our brand leaders and brand teams develop true omni-channel plans so that they can visualize and see all these channels at once and actually step back and look at the creative and say, is that a dog's breakfast, meaning, a mishmash of stuff? Or does it really look like it all hangs together from a story perspective? And is it omni-channel? So very exciting stuff.
Okay, next question just came in, although they're coming in faster than I can read them, which means you're very provocative. And so question, in a challenging business environment where ad dollars are stretched, how do you decide which brands to prop up the most or first? Is it the lighthouse brands or some of the lesser known brands in the MH portfolio? This is for you, Luis.
That's a great question. Without going into a lot of detail, as you might imagine, I think that the prioritization has been made around, on one side, some of the lighthouse brands, of course, but the prioritization of dollars has to do more with the consumer behavior, right? Like I said, for some cases, it's about driving awareness of the fact that you can buy alcohol online, which a lot of people are still not aware that you can do that. For other cases, it's guaranteeing for those who are already doing that behavior, because it's the type of consumer group we go after, that they are able to find our product at the competent price and in the way that they want to receive it, be it in real time, be it with shipping, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say it's a little bit of a mixed bag. It depends on a little bit of the consumer behavior. So like I said, people are not necessarily buying a lot of champagne right now, but they're buying cognac and they're buying beer. So there are specific brands that fit within that type of behavior that consumers are looking for, that it makes sense to put some of the money behind. And there are other brands that it's about just guarantee that that people can find you because people want to buy you. And yeah.
Okay. So the question for both of you guys, we know that we can't avoid Facebook, but what's the one thing you wish you could change about your Facebook or Instagram campaigns? And for the record, I've been spending more time on Facebook than ever before because of just the local groups that my neighborhood are a part of and the conversations we've had. But for you guys, how are you thinking about it? What do you wish you could change? How are you approaching it? We'll start with Ken first.
Well, I wish I could get the data back, so the exposure file data. So I wish I could get that back. One thing we're finding on Facebook that's been super helpful is when we push our first-party modeled audiences to Facebook, our return on ad spend has gone up considerably. So we are feeling good about our Facebook and Instagram spends when we push our audiences to those platforms. I think for us, social media is very, very important, particularly as we launch our CRM program. which is extremely important with regards to our ability to become better connected to consumers. We're going to need Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest, where people are spending an enormous amount of time, to expose them to our CRM program and entice them to visit, our microsite. So I think optimizing these channels to make them work harder and better and be more profitable, I think is definitely worth the endeavor.
So bolstering the specific role of each channel against your different sort of layers within that conversion funnel, right? And making sure that they are really strong in those ways.
Yeah, we're working right now with Twitter and with Facebook and obviously Instagram to develop a social media strategy. And we're not hiding the fact that, our strategy includes their competitors. And I don't think they want us to hide that fact. I think they understand that they each play a distinct role, right? How a brand shows up is very distinct. And so I think they're happy to have that conversation and say, okay, look, this is our role, and these are the KPIs, and this is what we can deliver for you. And here's what we think our competitors can deliver. And when we talk to them, we expect that same kind of candor, so that we can develop a holistic social media strategy that really leverages these platforms for their unique capabilities.
Okay. So a question here, when you think about generating brand awareness versus directly impacting sales, are there channels, to your point, Ken, that you find more effective for different purposes with respect to your brands, maybe without giving away the specific platform strategies?
Well, I'll let Louis take that because I just spoke a lot.
Okay.
I would say, some channels play more important roles in specific parts of the funnel than others, and we see that. But it also ties, of course, to your brand and to the consumer type that you're going after, right? So I've seen several brands, and I don't know, probably people in the audience feel the same. We've seen brands that just jump around channels as they become popular, and that becomes their new brand building channel versus the previous one. What we understand, and going to Ken's original point when he was talking about omnichannel, it's about this orchestration of the channels and the understanding that one might be helping you drive awareness, one might be helping you drive consideration, and one might be the best one to drive conversion, right? So we historically see, for example, for our brands, that consideration driving is really positively done in Instagram, for example, because of the type of image effect that it has, and just the overall usage that the audience does of it. But Facebook tends to be much better for us in terms of massifying a brand message to a larger audience and even driving conversion. Now, to Ken's point, and kind of piggybacking on his answer for the previous question, is the data back is my main pain point. I completely subscribe to that because we only know what works up to a certain point, and I think that's the part that ends up generating a frustration of what effectively works best on some channels.
Okay, so for all three of you, I guess all three of us, what brands do you look to for inspiration?
You want to go first, Ken? Or you want me?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Why not? Well, I guess I look to brands who are best in class at content marketing, who have turned content into in some cases, a revenue stream, like Red Bull. In other cases, they've made their marketing so compelling that you anticipate it and may even subscribe to it, like a Patagonia. When I get the Patagonia catalog, to me, it's not a catalog, it's a lifestyle magazine. And I love reading the stories about the athletes, and I love pretending I could be that cool. And of course, do I want to buy into that lifestyle? You betcha. Then they make that possible, but it's the content that really sucks me in. And that's what I hope someday our brands can be like.
No, it's funny, Ken. I could, again, fully subscribed. We're sharing a brain here. I think that there's a couple of brands that I tend to put in my radar to look at. Some of them because I really love, some of them because I think that they do a good job. The ones that I really love and I think they do a good job at the same time, one of them is Arby's. I would say Arby's social media strategy is off the charts. They know their audience. They do very much real time. It's impressive. So if you're a video game player like myself, as you can probably tell by now, the following Arby's is a must, because they do a fantastic job at connecting with their audience. Now, if you're not a video game player or a nerd like myself, you will look at Arby's and you'll absolutely hate their content. So that, for me, content that really resonates. It needs to be polarizing to a certain extent, because it means that you are effectively targeting and being faithful to your audience. Others that I think have done actually a very interesting job through this phase is Peloton. I think Peloton has done a fantastic job through this phase in terms of figuring out ways to make their content relevant, all the way through having their instructors do classes from home to mirror what the consumer is living through. So I think Peloton has a fantastic content strategy overall in place. And then to Ken's point, I think that overall furniture stores are doing actually a really interesting job. IKEA tends to be one of those that I always keep an eye on, because I think they do a fantastic job overall in terms of their digital ecosystem and content. But more recently, I thought Crate & Barrel was very smart, because Crate & Barrel focused a lot of their communications around at-home adventures with your kids, with the furniture and etc., building forts. So they found a way to bring positivity, for example, to this phase, while being very true to their brand, while being very true to a commercial reality. So those are three examples that I would recommend people to have a look. If you're not looking at Peloton, if you're not looking at Crate & Barrel, if you're not looking at IKEA, or if you're not looking at Arby's, those are four really cool examples that I would recommend having a look.
I'll give you three very quick, since no one really wants to hear me speak, but none of them are clients, none of them are partners. But if you look at them as three different layers of consideration and purchase, on the lowest level, Burger King to me always stands out as just creative geniuses. Next up for me on the mid-level for consideration is Nike. Everything that Nike does for me is gold, and I want to be and live and breathe the brand. And then the highest level of consideration is probably BMW. I don't buy cars every day, but when I do, they might be BMW. So that's for me. So we're going to do one more question, and then I'm going to hand it over to David. So, many brands right now have been using this time to put resources into philanthropic or altruistic efforts, whether it's repurposing or, thinking about organizations they can be partnering with. Do you think this bigger emphasis on cause marketing and brand purpose will persist once we return to normal? And David, I have to take a drink anytime someone says the new normal.
Why do you think I put that question in there?
So altruism, charity, is this here to stay in terms of purpose?
I would say absolutely. Absolutely, it's here to stay, and it should be here to stay. Consumers tell us time and time again that they want brands to step up, not only during COVID, where 33% of consumers surveyed had said they're punishing brands that haven't stepped up or haven't stepped up in the right way, but beyond that, before COVID, consumers look to brands to play a role in society. And you know what? It's wonderful, both from an external perspective and doing good, but it also means a lot internally. I think it galvanizes employees. It makes them feel that they're working on something bigger than themselves or with tremendous purpose. And as my former CEO at PepsiCo used to say in Granuli, performance with purpose. There's no reason that you can't perform extremely well and not also be purpose-driven. In fact, she would probably say, and I would agree, that you'll absolutely do better.
Yeah, absolutely. I will not add much more because I know you guys because we need to wrap up. But I think purpose is here to stay, and even there's several consumers that consider actually the situation that we're going through as a consequence of disrespecting the planet, disrespecting nature, disrespecting sustainability. So I believe that brands really have to take this seriously moving forward.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for great.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say to follow up on what Brian said in his opening. You guys have enabled us to rethink and reinvent and reimagine along these lines, and I appreciate your time and I appreciate the questions that came in, and look forward to seeing you all in real life, hopefully soon.
We will have the barbecue. I don't know, Luis, we can talk about who's going to provide the liquor when we do our Brand Innovators cook-off. So, but with that, guys, thank you so much. A good note to end on. I really do hope that we keep seeing more and more of these altruistic efforts coming in from the brands, because it does. I mean, to your point, it means a lot to consumers, and it means a lot internally when you can say you work for an organization that has a purpose and a greater good like that. So, we will have you all back again soon. Ken, Luis, Matt, thank you so much for joining us.